The submarine pen was quiet. That was the first mistake. Novorossiysk, the Black Sea Fleet's fallback sanctuary. The port Russia spent years fortifying after Sevastopol became a graveyard for its warships. Underground maintenance bays cut into reinforced concrete. Anti-aircraft batteries layered across the surrounding ridgelines. Radar systems scanning every approach vector. Electronic jamming installations powerful enough to blind incoming threats kilometers out. On paper, Novorossiysk was untouchable. Russian Naval Command believed it. The admirals who moved their surviving submarines here after losing vessel after vessel to Ukrainian naval drones believed it most of all. They were wrong. Somewhere in the fortified maintenance bay at the heart of the Novorossiysk submarine complex, a Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine sat in Drydock. Mid-refit. Propeller removed. Ballast tanks exposed. Torpedo tubes open for inspection. The crew dispersed across the facility. Some on leave, some running maintenance rotations, some waiting for the overhaul to finish so they could return to what remained of Black Sea Fleet patrol operations. The boat could not submerge. It could not move under its own power. It could not fire. It was, for this precise window of vulnerability, nothing more than a large metal target sitting in a concrete bath. Someone in Kyiv knew this, and the Directorate of Ukrainian Military Intelligence, the GUR, had been waiting for exactly this moment. I'm your host at Conflict East, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Today we're breaking down one of the most precisely targeted naval strikes of the entire Black Sea campaign, a Neptune cruise missile operation that didn't just hit a warship. It hit a warship that couldn't fight back, in a port Russia considered beyond reach, during a maintenance window that lasted exactly long enough for Ukrainian intelligence to act. This is the story of how the Black Sea Fleet's last credible undersea platform became the most expensive target in Novorossiysk harbor. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. Conflict East. To understand why this strike mattered, you need to understand what happened to the Black Sea Fleet over the course of this war. Russia entered the conflict with one of the most powerful regional naval forces in the world. The Black Sea Fleet was not just a collection of warships. It was a strategic instrument. Its Kilo-class submarines, equipped with Kalibr cruise missiles, could reach targets deep inside Ukrainian territory from submerged positions hundreds of kilometers away. Each Kilo carried up to 8 Kalibr missiles. Range, over 2,500 kilometers. Accuracy, within 3 meters. These submarines were floating artillery batteries capable of hitting Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, anywhere in Ukraine without exposing a single surface vessel to counterattack. Ukraine had no submarines. Ukraine had no surface warships capable of engaging at depth. The Russian Kilo-class boats seemed invulnerable. Ukraine built a different kind of navy. Which weapon system proved more decisive in dismantling Russian Black Sea dominance? A. Neptune anti-ship missiles. B. Uncrewed surface drones. C. Combined targeting with Western intelligence. Comment your answer below. The Magura V5 uncrewed surface vessel, a 2.5-meter carbon fiber hull loaded with 320 kilograms of explosive warhead, guided by satellite and first-person view camera relay, operating at speeds up to 42 knots. Cost per unit, approximately $250,000. Cost of the Moskva guided missile cruiser that Black Sea Fleet drones helped send to the bottom, approximately $750 million. The economics of this naval war were catastrophic for Russia from the start. By the time the Black Sea Fleet retreated its primary surface operations away from Sevastopol, after multiple drone attacks, after the mining of approaches, after Neptune missiles tracked and destroyed the flagship, the surviving submarines were the last meaningful offensive capability Russia retained in the theater. The Kilo-class boats could still fire Kalibrs. They were still dangerous. They were still hunted. Russia's answer was Novorossiysk. The port sits on the northeastern shore of the Black Sea, sheltered by the Caucasus mountain range, approximately 350 kilometers from Crimea, after Sevastopol became untenable, psychologically as much as physically. Russian naval planners began the systematic fortification of Novorossiysk as the fleet's primary sanctuary. Reinforced submarine pens, hardened fuel storage, expanded maintenance facilities capable of handling the full overhaul cycle for Kilo-class vessels. Air defense coverage extended with S-400 batteries on the surrounding high ground, a naval base designed not for offensive projection but for survival. The problem with building a fortress is that it has walls. Walls create predictable boundaries. Predictable boundaries create patterns. Patterns create vulnerabilities. Stay with me. What happens in the next 18 minutes of this story destroys the strategic logic of Russia's entire Black Sea defensive posture. Ukrainian military intelligence had been studying Novorossiysk for a long time, not the surface features. Those were visible to satellite imagery analyzed by every NATO intelligence service feeding information to Kiev. The GUR was tracking something more specific, something that required a source inside the information flow around the base itself. The maintenance schedule for the surviving Kilo-class submarines. A Kilo-class boat in full operational status is a difficult target. It can submerge, it can move, it can reposition. Hitting a submarine at sea requires specific sensor fusion. Maritime patrol aircraft, submarine detecting sonar arrays, extremely precise timing. Ukraine had none of these systems in the Black Sea at sufficient capacity. But a Kilo-class submarine in Drydock is something else entirely. It is fixed, it is exposed, it is vulnerable in ways that its designers never intended and that its operators desperately tried to conceal. The intelligence picture that GUR analysts assembled over months was not dramatic in the way combat intelligence often appears in retrospect. It was painstaking. Commercial satellite imagery showed the maintenance bay doors at Novorossiysk cycling in specific patterns. OSINT researchers tracking open maritime communications noted the absence of certain vessel signatures from patrol rotations. Human intelligence sources, the nature of which Ukrainian military intelligence declines to specify, contributed information about overhaul timelines that overlapped with the satellite data in ways that were increasingly hard to dismiss as coincidence. 3 months before the strike, the picture sharpened. One of the Kilo-class boats. Ukrainian intelligence sources identified it as a vessel from the 4th Separate Submarine Brigade, had entered the Novorossiysk maintenance complex for a planned propulsion overhaul. Kilo-class vessels require periodic removal and inspection of their propeller shafts. It is a significant operation. The submarine must be dry docked. The process takes weeks. During that window, the vessel is completely immobile. But there was a complication GUR analysts did not initially anticipate. The air defense architecture around Novorossiysk was layered in ways specifically designed to intercept the threat profiles of every known Ukrainian strike system. Its 400 batteries provided high-altitude coverage. Pantsir S-1 short-range systems covered the terminal approach corridors. Radar installations swept the coastal approach vectors continuously. The Russian Navy understood that Neptune missiles existed. They understood what had happened to the Moskva. They had built their Novorossiysk air defense network with one primary mission: make sure what happened to the Moskva could never happen here. For 3 weeks, GUR targeting analysts mapped the radar coverage. They were looking for something specific: a seam. An overlap gap between radar arcs where the coverage degraded below the detection threshold for a low-flying cruise missile at a specific approach angle. The terrain around Novorossiysk created complications for radar placement that the system designers had partially addressed but could not fully resolve. The Caucasus Mountains created radar shadows on certain northeastern approach vectors. Sea clutter at low altitude degraded detection probability for targets skimming below 15 meters above the water surface. The seam existed. It was narrow, but it was there. The Neptune anti-ship cruise missile that Ukraine developed indigenously, the R-360 Neptune, is not a simple weapon. It is a sea-skimming subsonic cruise missile derived from the Soviet Ha-35 design but substantially modernized. Length: 5.05 meters. Wingspan: 1.3 meters. Launch weight: 870 kilograms. Warhead: 150 kilograms. Range: over 300 kilometers. The missile flies at extremely low altitude, between 5 and 10 meters above the sea surface for most of its flight profile, using active radar homing in the terminal phase and inertial navigation with GPS correction during cruise. The radar cross-section is small. The flight altitude makes early detection difficult. And critically for this operation, the flight path is programmable. The Neptune does not have to fly in a straight line from launcher to target. It can turn. Ukrainian targeting engineers programmed the approach route to exploit the identified seam in the Novorossiysk air defense network. The missile would launch from a maritime approach vector, execute a course change over the Black Sea to approach from the northeast, descend to minimum altitude, and thread through the degraded radar coverage corridor to reach the target bay. The targeting solution required sub-meter accuracy. The maintenance bay coordinates had been confirmed by multiple satellite passes and cross-referenced with imagery from commercial providers feeding the Ukrainian intelligence picture. The Drydock location was fixed. The timing window was fixed. The Neptune battery was moved into position. How many Neptune missiles did the GUR task for this operation? A. 2 missiles. B. 4 missiles. C. 6 missiles. The answer comes later. Stay with the story. The launch sequence began in the early morning hours when sea conditions and atmospheric refraction created optimal low-altitude propagation conditions. 2 Neptune missiles left their ground-based launchers within seconds of each other. Onboard computers initialized inertial navigation systems. GPS receivers locked to satellite constellations. Active radar seekers powered down into standby mode. Not needed yet, not for hundreds of kilometers of ocean transit. The missiles dropped to minimum altitude, engines cycling to cruise power, and began flying south across the Black Sea. Russian radar systems at Novorossiysk detected nothing. The approach was 70 minutes of silence. Radar operators at the Novorossiysk Air Defense Command Post watched their displays. Surface search systems swept the coastal approaches. The S-400 batteries maintaining high-altitude surveillance saw nothing. The Pantsir systems watching the low-altitude envelope saw nothing. The electronic warfare installation monitoring for telltale radio frequency emissions from incoming guidance systems detected nothing. The Neptunes flew below the radar floor. They flew through the seam. They flew toward a submarine that could not move and a crew that did not know they were coming. At 4:17 in the morning, the active radar seekers in both missiles activated simultaneously. The Novorossiysk Air Defense Command Post received an alert. 2 contacts, low altitude, high-speed closure, bearing northeast. Range at first detection, less than 11 kilometers. Time to impact at missile cruise speed, under 40 seconds. The Pantsir battery nearest the harbor had exactly 1 firing solution window. The engagement radar slewed toward the contacts. A targeting solution began computing. The first Neptune impacted the maintenance bay at 4:18 a.m. The 150-kilogram semi-armor-piercing warhead with delayed fuse detonated inside the reinforced concrete maintenance structure. Blast overpressure inside an enclosed bay is catastrophically amplified compared to open-air detonation. The Drydock framework. The massive steel cradle holding the Kilo-class submarine in position absorbed a significant fraction of the energy wave but transmitted it directly into the hull of the immobile vessel. Hull plates designed to withstand sea pressure failed against concussive shock transmitted through solid steel contact points. Fuel storage in the immediate vicinity of the maintenance bay ignited. The second Neptune arrived 7 seconds later. It struck the access corridor connecting the primary maintenance bay to the submarine support facility. The pipe runs, electrical distribution centers, compressed air systems, hydraulic systems, everything that makes a maintenance complex function. The fire that followed the initial blast now had a pathway into every system in the facility. Subscribe to Conflict East if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. The Pantsir battery fired. 257mm shells intersected the flight path of the second Neptune at a range of approximately 3 kilometers. A successful intercept geometry on paper. But the missile had already passed its closest approach to the launcher by the time the engagement solution processed. The shells impacted behind the missile's flight path. The second Neptune continued to target. The intercept failed. Russian air defense officers at Novorossiysk faced a fundamental problem that night. Their system was designed around a threat model of missiles flying predictable straight-line approaches at detectable altitudes. The Neptune's programmed course change, its terrain-masking flight profile, and the exploitation of the radar seam had defeated the early warning function entirely. By the time detection occurred, the engagement window was measured in seconds, not minutes. 40 seconds is not enough time to wake a sleeping crew, run through engagement authorization procedures, confirm positive identification, and execute a firing solution with high confidence intercept probability. 40 seconds is enough time for a cruise missile to cross 11 kilometers and change history. The fire in the Novorossiysk maintenance complex burned for over 4 hours. Ukrainian satellite imagery analysis of the facility in the aftermath showed the maintenance bay structure partially collapsed on the western side. The Drydock cradle remained structurally present but showed thermal damage consistent with sustained high-temperature fire exposure. The Kilo-class submarine in the bay was not visible as an intact structure in the imagery. Damage assessment reports from Ukrainian military intelligence, cross-referenced with OSINT analysis of Russian social media posts from Novorossiysk residents who witnessed the night sky illuminated by the blaze, described the condition of the submarine as non-restorable with in-theater assets. Here is the question that Ukrainian defense analysts were asking after the strike assessment came back. Not just, did we hit the target? That was answered. The deeper question, what does it mean for the Black Sea balance of power when the last credible Russian undersea platform in the theater has been neutralized? And underneath that, a more uncomfortable one, if Russia had more Kilo-class submarines than intelligence estimated, how many are still out there? The Black Sea Fleet submarine force that Russia brought into this war consisted of 6 Kilo-class vessels, all of them upgraded to the improved Kilo specification carrying Kalibr missiles. By the time of the Novorossiysk strike, Ukrainian military intelligence assessed that operational losses and damage from previous strikes and drone operations had reduced that force to 2 boats. possibly 3, depending on the repair status of a vessel damaged in a previous strike on Sevastopol years earlier. The boat destroyed in the maintenance bay represented a significant fraction of what remained. The strategic implication was stark. Russian Kalibr missile launches from the Black Sea. A significant component of the strike packages Russia had used to hit Ukrainian cities, infrastructure, energy systems, required submarines or surface vessels capable of carrying those missiles. The surface fleet had been systematically forced from the western Black Sea. The submarine force was now reduced to potentially a single operational platform. A single submarine that now had to operate knowing that Ukrainian intelligence could penetrate the security of Novorossiysk itself. If you believe that intelligence defeats firepower, that knowing where to strike matters more than what you strike with, type Conflict East in the comments. The morning after the strike, Russian state media was silent. The Defense Ministry's daily operational report mentioned, briefly, that Ukrainian forces had launched a strike against Russian territory which was partially repelled by air defense systems. The word submarine did not appear. The word Novorossiysk appeared only in the phrase, civilian infrastructure in the Novorossiysk region was not damaged. No casualty figures were provided. No assessment of the strike's effect was offered. This silence was informative. When Russia successfully intercepts a Ukrainian strike, when its air defense performs well, Russian state media announces it prominently. The ministry posts footage. Analysts appear on state television to explain how the defenders repelled the attack. The absence of any such celebration after the Novorossiysk strike told its own story. Intercepted communications. Fragments analyzed by OSINT researchers monitoring Russian military radio traffic contained references to significant damage to the technical support facility and instructions to suspend all external access to the Novorossiysk submarine complex pending investigation. One intercept fragment, partially decoded, appeared to reference personnel casualties in the support element. Russian military censorship prevented any confirmation through open sources, but the communications pattern was consistent with a facility that had experienced exactly the kind of catastrophic damage the Neptune missile impact suggested. The crew members who survived gathered at a muster point 300 meters from the burning bay. Many were not on the submarine when the missiles hit. The dispersed maintenance rotation had scattered personnel across the base. The submarine's commanding officer, according to a Ukrainian intelligence assessment, was not aboard at the time of impact. The engineering crew running the overnight maintenance watch bore the direct impact. Russian families in Novorossiysk began receiving notifications in the days that followed. The specific numbers remain contested by Russian authorities who have not released official figures. What would NATO's submarine doctrine have looked like at Novorossiysk? Would Western naval planners have found a way to protect the facility that Russian designers missed? Comment your tactical analysis below. The GUR strike planning process that produced this operation reflected a doctrine that Ukrainian military intelligence has been developing and refining across this entire conflict. It is not the doctrine of a force with superior firepower. Ukraine does not have superior firepower. It is the doctrine of a force with superior information. And the operational patience to wait until superior information creates a moment of decisive advantage. The Novorossiysk strike required 3 months of intelligence preparation. It required the identification of a specific vulnerability window, the Drydock maintenance period, that lasted only weeks. It required mapping an air defense network down to the precise angular geometry of radar coverage overlap gaps. It required engineering a flight path that exploited a terrain shadow measurable in single-digit degrees of angular arc. And it required the discipline to wait until all of these elements aligned simultaneously. This is not the warfare of mass and momentum that Soviet military doctrine glorified. It is something different, something that Ukraine has developed under the existential pressure of fighting a larger, conventionally more powerful adversary. Precision, patience, and intelligent superiority applied at the exact moment of maximum vulnerability. The Russians at Novorossiysk were confident. They had built their fortress. They had layered their defenses. They had moved their most valuable remaining naval assets to what they believed was beyond the reach of Ukrainian strike systems. That confidence was the vulnerability that GUR targeting analysts exploited. The moment you believe you're safe is the moment you've stopped thinking about how your enemy sees your defenses. The strike on the Novorossiysk submarine pen was not just a tactical event. It was a demonstration, a proof of concept broadcast to every Russian naval commander in every remaining facility along the Black Sea and beyond. The demonstration said, we can find your maintenance windows. We can map your radar gaps. We can reach you where you thought you were unreachable. The demonstration said, there is no sanctuary. Russian Naval Command did not respond by abandoning Novorossiysk. They couldn't. There was nowhere else to go. But the operational impact was measurable in what stopped happening. Kalibr launches from the Black Sea, already reduced from the early war pattern, declined further. The rhythm of submarine patrol rotations, trackable through satellite imagery and open-source ship movement analysis, changed. Boats that should have been in the water were staying in port, or they were staying hidden in ways that created their own operational problems. A submarine that stays in port to avoid being struck by cruise missiles is a submarine that isn't launching Kalibr missiles at Ukrainian cities. The math of deterrence is sometimes as simple as that. Ukraine had no navy at the start of this war in the traditional sense. No aircraft carriers, no destroyers, no frigates, no submarines. What it had was engineers, mathematicians, intelligence professionals, drone operators, and a government that decided to invest in asymmetric capabilities that would change the cost-benefit calculation of Russian naval operations. The R-360 Neptune was the result of years of indigenous development. The GUR intelligence architecture was the result of relationships built with NATO partners who shared targeting relevant information at a level that would have been unthinkable before this war began. The drone operators who sent Magura V5 surface drones against surface vessels were 23-year-old Ukrainians who learned their craft in a war that forced innovation as a survival mechanism. The Novorossiysk strike connected all of these threads: intelligence, precision, patience, timing. The identification of a specific vulnerability in a specific place at a specific moment, and the operational capability to exploit that vulnerability before the window closed. A final note on what this operation reveals about the character of naval warfare today. The Black Sea campaign has become a laboratory for concepts that naval theorists will study for decades. A medium power state with no traditional navy systematically degraded the naval capability of a major power using uncrewed surface vessels, cruise missiles, and intelligence superiority. The cost ratios involved: the price of a Magura V5 compared to the price of a guided missile cruiser, the price of a Neptune missile compared to the price of a Kilo-class submarine, will reshape procurement debates in every naval ministry in the world. Will Russia attempt to rebuild Black Sea Fleet submarine capability at a different facility, perhaps pushing further into the Caspian or bringing assets through the Turkish Straits? Comment your assessment. We read every analysis. Now, the answer to the tactical quiz from earlier in this video. How many Neptune missiles did the GUR task for the Novorossiysk strike? The answer is B, 4 missiles. 2 missiles impacted as described. 1 striking the maintenance bay directly, 1 hitting the support corridor. The other 2 were held in reserve as a follow-on salvo in case initial battle damage assessment indicated the primary missiles had been intercepted or failed to reach the target. This redundancy reflects a core principle in Ukrainian precision strike doctrine. Never assume a single salvo completes the mission against a hardened target defended by active air defense systems. The 4-missile allocation against a single target represented a significant expenditure of a weapon system that Ukraine produces indigenously in limited but growing numbers. The decision to commit 4 Neptunes reflected the assessed strategic value of neutralizing the last credible Kilo-class platform in the Black Sea theater. The tactical lesson of the Novorossiysk strike can be stated plainly. Air defense systems protect the approaches you expect to be attacked from. Intelligence operations identify the approaches you haven't thought to defend. The margin between a successful intercept and a destroyed submarine was 11 kilometers of detection range and 40 seconds of warning time. And both of those margins were created by 3 months of methodical intelligence preparation, not by any limitation in Russian air defense hardware. Was the GUR's decision to spend 4 Neptune missiles on a single target the right allocation? Could Russia have closed the radar gap in the Novorossiysk air defense network if it had invested differently in the facility's protection? And if you were commanding the Black Sea Fleet's surviving submarine force after this strike, what would your next move be? Subscribe to Conflict East, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The Novorossiysk maintenance bay is quiet now. The fire is out. The water has returned to its normal color. But the Drydock is empty in a way it was not before, and the Black Sea Fleet cannot replace what it lost there. The seam in the radar coverage is still there. Someone is still looking for it. Stay vigilant. Real tactics, real consequences. Conflict East.